Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking what is easily one of the darkest, most tangled financial conspiracies of the entire 20th century. We're looking at a story that mashes up high finance, secret societies, organized crime, and, well, institutional secrecy, all culminating in a single event that literally shocked the world. We'll break it down step by step because, honestly, it's the ultimate cautionary tale about the absolute dangers of shadow banking and unchecked power. Picture the scene. It's June 18th, 1982. We're in London, and that classic early morning fog is rolling right over the River Thames. A crew of construction workers is just starting their day near Blackfriars Bridge when they spot something horrifying. Hanging right beneath the massive arches of the bridge is a man's body. But as police pull him down and start their initial sweep, they realize pretty quickly this is absolutely not your standard crime scene. Because, get this, the police found a truly bizarre set of items on the victim. His pockets were quite literally stuffed with heavy construction bricks. He had a bunch of cash on him, but not just local pounds. He was carrying money in 3 different currencies. And, to top the whole shebang off, a fake passport. So right away, this clearly isn't some random mugging gone wrong. It's a highly staged, completely unusual setup. And once they figured out who this guy actually was, well, it turned a local tragedy into a massive international scandal.
Which brings us to part 1. Who was God's banker?
To figure out why a man ended up hanging from a London bridge with literal bricks in his pockets, we've got to look at his day job. The victim was Roberto Calvi. Now, to the world, and especially the press, he was known by this incredibly heavy moniker, God's banker. And that nickname alone kind of gives you a hint at his deep, ultra-secretive ties to the absolute highest levels of global power. He wasn't just some local branch manager. The guy was a financial wizard. Calvi was the one operating behind the curtain, quietly moving mountains of cash for high-ranking prelates, powerful politicians, and even covert operations all across Europe. You see, Calvi basically lived in 2 distinct, incredibly powerful worlds. On one hand, he sat at the head of Banco Ambrosiano. At the time, that was Italy's absolute largest private bank. Huge deal. But on the other hand, you had the Institute for the Works of Religion, better known to us as the Vatican Bank. In these 2 massive institutions, they were deeply, intimately tied together. Banco Ambrosiano's financial links to the Vatican Bank gave Calvi this aura of, divine alignment and just immense prestige. He was operating right at the intersection of untold wealth and unwavering faith.
But let's move into part 2, the missing billion.
Because as we so often see with these historical mysteries, appearances can be incredibly deceiving. Behind that glossy facade of prestige, Calvi's empire was actually rotting from the inside out. The big turning point here is a staggering deficit they discovered in the early 1980s, $1.3 billion. I mean, that is an absolutely massive, catastrophic hole to find in a bank's ledger. It turns out, Calvi had been setting up ghost companies in places like the Bahamas and Latin America to route unexplained loans through this incredibly complex network of offshore shell operations. And when his financial magic trick finally started to unravel, it sent absolute shockwaves through international markets. When Banco Ambrosiano inevitably collapsed under the sheer weight of that deficit, it triggered explosive investigations pretty much immediately. And man, the fingers started pointing everywhere. Investigators uncovered this tangled web connecting Calvi not just to the Vatican Bank, but directly to the Italian mafia and to another highly secretive group known as Propaganda Do, or just P2. Now Calvi wasn't just dealing with your average corrupt bankers or street-level mobsters. Propaganda Do was a secret, ultra-powerful Italian Masonic lodge. And we're not talking about a harmless social club here. P2 operated almost entirely like a shadow government. They were pulling strings across all sorts of sectors in Italian society and politics. So Calvi was completely, inextricably entangled with some seriously dangerous and powerful factions. So knowing exactly where all the bodies were buried, and more importantly, knowing where all that missing money actually was, Calvi knew he was a walking target. With his bank gone, he couldn't protect his dangerous clients anymore. Panicking and absolutely terrified for his life, Calvi made a desperate run for it. Just days before his death, he fled Italy using, you guessed it, that fake passport the police eventually found on him in London. Which leads us to part 3, suicide or murder. When Calvi was found hanging in the fog that morning, the authorities had a massive, incredibly high-profile case dropped right in their laps. Initially, British authorities took what a lot of people consider the path of least resistance. Their official ruling, suicide. Their logic was basically that Calvi was disgraced, his empire was gone, and he supposedly chose Blackfriars Bridge as this dark, symbolic nod to the Blackfriars moniker of his collapsed bank. But independent investigators, along with Calvi's own family, immediately called out the total absurdity of this official story when you actually look at the physical reality of the crime scene. I mean, we really have to ask ourselves how these physical actions were even possible. Look at the logistics for a second. Roberto Calvi was 63 years old. To hang himself from that specific spot on the bridge, he would have had to climb over construction scaffolding, tie a rope around his own neck, and then drop off. Yet forensic analysis showed there was literally not a single trace of paint or rust from that scaffolding anywhere on his expensive suit. Not one smudge. And it gets weirder when you think about those bricks. If this was really a suicide, Calvi would have had to physically pick up heavy, rough construction bricks and stuff them deep into his own pockets to weigh himself down, right? But there was absolutely zero physical evidence on his hands to suggest he did that. His fingers were completely free of the concrete dust you'd 100% expect to find if he had been handling raw bricks. The physical evidence just did not match the official narrative, at all. It actually took decades of relentless pressure, but science finally caught up with the obvious. Decades later, exhumations and modern forensic reexaminations were conducted, and the results confirmed what his family and independent researchers had suspected all along. This was no symbolic suicide. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't a suicide of any kind. It was a staged execution. It was cold-blooded murder.
And that brings us to our final section, part 4, an unsolved legacy.
So the truth of the murder was finally out in the open, which is great. But despite this huge win for forensics, the quest for actual accountability hit a massive brick wall. After his death was officially reclassified as a murder, there were trials. Various mob figures were brought in and accused of doing the actual physical killing. But the ultimate puppet masters, the people who actually had the motive and the real power to order a hit on God's banker, they've never faced justice. To this very day, not a single person has ever been convicted for ordering the murder of Roberto Calvi. The death of Roberto Calvi remains one of modern history's most chilling examples of what happens when organized crime, high finance, and institutional secrecy all collide in the dark. It leaves us with some truly haunting questions to ponder as we wrap things up today. How deep did this rabbit hole really go? And who, sitting in the upper echelons of global power, wanted God's bankers silenced forever? Was it just the mob tying up some loose ends, or does the trail lead all the way back to the shadow governments and untouchable institutions he served? It's a stark reminder that when money operates entirely in the shadows, the consequences are deadly, and the ultimate puppet masters rarely, if ever, face the light. Thanks for joining this explainer.